This Reinvent Technology and Politics Roundtable did several things. On the one hand, it could have just looked at what are the big tech developments in the 2014 political cycle. But no, the all-star group assembled here really looked hard at how technology has really so far not lived up to its full potential of fully democratizing American society.
Technology has largely unrealized, not fully realized the potential of technology to improve democracy. So we've had a radical transformation in campaigns, right? Especially in 2012 around optimization, around analytics, big data. But the biggest problem we have in our democracy isn't that we haven't had very good ad targeting. We have many more fundamental problems than that. And the same fundamental problem we've had for decades, we think, is the incredible influence of money in politics. This has not been changed dramatically yet by technology, and it has huge downstream impacts. We know a lot of these, it impacts who runs for office, it impacts who wins, and how they govern. And then because of that, it also substantially impacts people's participation within campaigns, and most importantly, we think, between campaigns and legislative sessions. That is when policy is unfolded to really change people's lives.
No, I'm with Ben completely. A big disappointment in terms of the ability of technology and what a lot of people have been working on to actually change the democracy or improve it. It's been a disaster. In fact, it's actually worked the other way. I think one of the things that you've got to do is make both parties obsolete. Anything we create, they're going to try to take and use it to their advantage. And so all you do is create two parties with better tools that we created for them to manipulate people.
Technology has really only impacted how candidates can market themselves and really attack each other. And it really is just creating more noise.
There's a reason these guys spend the money on negative ads. It's not to persuade people, it's to stop the other guy's people from wanting to vote.
Instead of just bemoaning difficulties of changing the system or the resistance of the existing system to crush real change, they in fact talked about what are the key developments happening now that could counter the overwhelming influence of money in politics, for example.
I really do believe that tech will improve democracy. I think it's actually nice to see the tech industry care about these issues of democracy.
We talk a lot about money in politics, and it can be invested in much more effectively in person-to-person and in targeted communications and online ads and things like that to drive engagement.
The biggest transformations here are mobile and on social. On the mobile side, in large part, it's going to, I think, be explosive over the next couple of election cycles and mass mobilization using this transformative device where every single person on the day of the election will have it on their person and in the voting booth as well. That is massively transformative, and it will be social. And one of the most impactful ways in which to influence people's votes is to influence through friends.
Well, I just want to touch on a quick point Ben made in terms of the power of person-to-person contact, because that really is the most effective way to get someone to go out and vote. Now, what's great in terms of the area of technology that we're moving into, and as technology evolves, it makes it a lot easier to do that person-to-person contact in a lot of different ways. It's not just they knock on the door anymore.
And I also want to throw out a somewhat controversial idea that sometimes all the talk that we often use about money in politics gives people an excuse to check out. It says to them that it's a corrupt environment that they don't want to be any part of, when what we need to be doing is figuring out how to bring people back in.
If we can actually use new social and mobile technology to make peer-to-peer communications far more effective, it's both going to be the case. That will happen more organically, therefore reducing the influence of money in politics. And the money in politics can be more effectively deployed, augmenting those strategies.
In politics, campaigns are the startups and candidates are the companies in a sense. And that, I think it would be very interesting for the tech industry to get behind candidates, probably initially at a local or state level, who are trying to reach their constituents in totally new ways.
Our great concern is this. You spend all this money and time and energy on getting people to the polls, only to go to a polling experience that is so terrible that nobody wants to go back. And there's lots of things that we can do to improve the polling place experience. It doesn't have to be a fancy new fourth generation touchscreen for ballot marking. It can be as simple as tools to help people know when is the best time to try to get to the polling place and how long is that line.
Different people out there, everybody on this panel building different new ways to do things better, but you've got a management class and a consultant class wed to the old ways. They don't understand the new ways, and we're actually kind of waiting for the kids to actually get to a place of power in these campaigns to actually say, no, we're not going to do that old way anymore. There's a better way to do it to actually get people engaged instead of using the bludgeon of television to disengage them.
Although we were looking at developments in the 2014 political cycle, inevitably everyone kept looking to the 2016 political cycle and beyond, where the really big changes could happen. And there were some really interesting predictions on what to see in the presidential space, particularly through Joe Trippi, and also even at the more local level. Some really interesting calls, some really interesting predictions.
The next really massive advance in a campaign is probably going to come from somebody who's not in power. No one in power in either party is actually all that motivated to mess with the game. Whether it's 2016 or 2020, there's going to be a successful independent run for president because the tool sets are there now. I'm looking for it to come from an insurgent who comes out of neither party. It takes them both on, sort of like Orman's doing in Kansas right now.
Yeah, I think that unequivocally, and it may not be for president, it may start in Congress, but there will be a candidate for Congress in the next 2 or 4 years who will commit to voting for legislation in accordance with the online votes of their constituents. And they will probably lose, but they will get lots of press, and there will be somebody in the next election cycle that will do the same thing in a more sophisticated way.
I think, and maybe I'm a lot more positive about the potential impact of tech in totally changing the way campaigns are being done. But it seems to me that all of the rules that we now have at the FEC are going to have to change.
One of the amazing things I think about covering national politics is that very often it's just a very few people with a new idea, right? You know, one person on the inside who's sort of willing to try something new. One of the strongest feelings I have now in sort of surveying the field is there are just more of those people now in positions of power. You
know, I've spent 25 years in the video game industry. Video games are going to be just fine without me. I'd love to spend, you know, the next 25 years working on these kinds of problems. And I think there's other people out there like that too.
The beauty of the Reinventors Roundtable is we bring people from different perspectives, particularly inside and outside government. And what was great about this roundtable is, in fact, we hit the high bar, the high standard of actually achieving something within this and actually leading to actionable item after.
From my perspective as chair, I mean, one of the things that I want to do is hear from the tech industry, maybe even get an advisory group to talk to us about how we should make changes.
An advisory panel like she's talking about really has to be there to help. It always struck me as weird that the FEC never asked us, people in the Dean campaign, hey, what would you do? Or what were the problems? Because no one ever did. To this day, no one's ever asked us that question.
The future chair of the FEC literally said two things which were remarkable, Ann. One is all the rules we have are going to have to change. And the second is money in politics is a problem, and I'd be happily out of a job.
There's no doubt that technology has made a big impact on politics and social change in the last decade. But what was great was no one rested on our laurels. In fact, it was just the opposite. The sense here was, how can you make technology create a more direct democracy? How can you more fully democratize power? How could you really use these new tools to take it to a whole other plane of changing the way society runs? And it was that great high bar, technology's kind of high bar, that kept coursing through the conversation and kept a real positive and optimistic sense that our best days are still ahead.
The narrative we've heard on this call is largely similar to the narrative we've heard in the media, which is sort of the intersection of both these contradictory beliefs. One is this disillusionment of politics, this frustration of the excessive money in the way in which we run our governance, and that it undermines people's participation. And there's this other narrative, which is the incredible capacity of technology to massively disrupt, dramatically engage, and to transform industries. And they're both right. And the question is, what's going to win out in the end? The transformation that you once expected of the technology ends up being realized. It just takes a lot longer than you expect. I think there's going to be something very disruptive and exciting that increasingly starts to happen in the next, maybe not, certainly not this next election cycle, maybe not 2 years, but 4 and 6 years. I think it's especially exciting to see people that we don't expect whatsoever, that will end up using something fundamentally different, and they themselves may not win. They'll change, I think, the game in a significant way. And I do think that in the long term, people who bet on technology and technology optimists have almost always been right. I think they'll be right in this case. And the question is, how long will it take?